Hi there and welcome to another video. This is Gina from McGuire. So today I'm sharing with you a technique called Layered Distress Oxide Resist. Now this layered resist technique works really well with Distress Oxide inks thanks to their unique and wonderful properties. There are other inks you can use and I'll talk about that, but Distress Oxide inks offer such unique properties and there are so many fun things you can do with them. So we'll do a few cards today, all with layered resist backgrounds. This is a great way to use your individual stamps to create fun backgrounds and then add simple die cut sentiments on top. We're going to start with this card first. I'm using the Concord and 9th Thankful Leaves Turnabout stamp set. I'm a big fan of Concord and 9th Turnabout stamp sets, and you've probably seen me use them in my videos in the past. This one is gorgeous, and I'm going to show you how to set it up. You only have to set it up once when you get it. Now, I will show you after this card how to do this technique with individual stamps if you don't have a turnabout. Okay, so when you get the turnabout stamp, you need to set it up right away. And the first thing you want to do is flip over the packaging. On the back of the packaging is a guide. You'll take your stamp and you'll line it up with the guide. So you line up your images on the stamp with the images on the package. Once you have it lined up, you're going to use a black permanent pen to draw an X that lines up with the X on the packaging. So I use a T ruler to do that, and now on the back of my stamp there is an X. People have asked why Concord and 9th doesn't manufacture it with an X like that. That's because the stamp manufacturing process doesn't allow for that, but you only need to do it once. Next, you need a 6x6 piece of cardstock with an X drawn through the center. This will be your turntable. I have so many Turnabout stamp sets that I went ahead and made one with an X on it and laminated it so I can reuse it over and over. You take your stamp and you line up the X on your turntable with the X on your stamp. Then you close your stamping tool onto it. You'll need some sort of stamping tool for this. I like the MISTI stamping tool, and this gives you incredible results. So now you can glue any paper you want, temporarily glue or tape, any paper you want onto that turntable to do the stamping for this background. All you're going to do is stamp and then rotate it, stamp again and rotate it, and do that 4 times to cover a background. However, today instead of stamping on this piece of cardstock that's smaller than the turntable and using the turntable for the stamping, I'm just going to use a 6x6 piece of cardstock. So I'll just stamp directly on this, and I'll have a large background that I can cut smaller pieces from. So again, this is a 6x6 piece of cardstock. I use Neenah Classic Crest Solar White. It's a nice high quality white cardstock. Any thick white cardstock would work. I used an anti-static powder tool on the background since I'll be doing heat embossing. Now I'm stamping my first layer here with VersaMark ink. That's a clear sticky ink, so you won't see it. And then I'll add clear embossing powder on this. So instead of just stamping all of these images, I'll be heat embossing every time. In fact, I'm not going to stamp with any colored inks for today's background. So here I'm heat setting it. You won't see it, but there are clear heat embossed leaves on that white background. After letting this cool, I'm going to apply my first layer of Distress Oxide ink. Now I'm putting this down as heavy as I can, so I'm going direct to paper with ink pad. Once you cover this so much that you do not see any white cardstock anymore, you're going to buff it with a dry cloth. I normally use reusable cloths, but mine are all in the laundry today, so I'm using paper towels. Either would work fine, but make sure it's dry. So I'm going to buff this so well that my leaves look nice and white, because remember, that's clear embossing trapping that white paper underneath, and so that I can make this as dry as possible. Distress Oxides inks have a unique property in that they're somewhat like dye inks and somewhat like pigment inks. So this background won't dry immediately because of that pigment ink property. So you want to wipe off as much ink as you can, and then you want to heat set it and make sure you dry as much as you can. Now people are going to ask if you can do this with other inks. Yes, you can do this with other pigment inks, but it'll take a lot longer to dry. You can do this with dye inks, but when we layer all the colors on top, the colors don't layer as much, but instead mix, which I'll talk about in a little bit as we start layering. So dry this the best you can. That looks hilarious. Because I got that on high speed. Anyways. And now we're going to put it back into our MISTI, but we'll rotate it one turn from the position we did before so that we can stamp this turnabout stamp again. Now this is the most important step, and that is to generously apply an anti-static powder tool over the whole background, because that Distres Oxide ink we put on the background may want to hold extra embossing powder. So I have rotated my stamp, remember that, and I'm stamping it with VersaMark ink again. Then we will clear heat emboss again. You want to make sure you tap off any excess from the background that may want to stick. So this time, under that clear embossing, we're trapping some of that green twisted Citron Distres Oxide ink. So we'll end up with some different colored leaves on our background. So here you won't see it much because again, it's just clear embossing, but I'm heat setting it. And once it's cool, we'll apply another layer of Distres Oxide ink. I like my bottom layer to be the lightest color and then work my way up to darker colors. So this time I'm using Mowed Lawn Distres Oxide. I'm applying it very generously and then removing the excess as much as I can with the dry cloths, rotating often for a clean spot on my cloth. Now you'll notice that the white leaves from our first layer of embossing becomes white when we remove the excess ink, but then we also have the green leaves that we just did with our clear embossing. We trapped that green twisted citron underneath it. Okay, so now we'll go ahead and put this back in our MISTI, rotate it again. Then we'll use our anti-static powder tool and clear heat emboss another layer. Now, if you wanted to, you could have just started with white cardstock, stamped the leaves in different colors of Distres Oxide ink, and clear heat embossed each of the leaves. And you'd end up with a white background with lots of colorful heat embossed leaves. Then you could take a green Distres Oxide ink over the whole background, and you'd end up with a background with a lot of contrast. By doing it this way, where we're layering lots of inks, you get a more subdued background that I think really gives a nice look. Okay, now that we've clear heat embossed that layer, we can add Evergreen Bough Distres Oxide ink, which is a beautiful greenish blue. We're going to really need to try to remove as much excess ink as we can with dry cloths, and you can see all the green leaves popping up. I heat set that, and I'm putting in our MISTI and rotating it the fourth and final time. Use that anti-static powder tool, stamp with VersaMark ink, but this time, instead of clear embossing, I'm going to use Hero Art's Satin White Pearl Embossing ink. You could do clear embossing and another layer of colorful ink on top, but I like the color of the background here. So for this last set of leaves, I'm using this white satin pearl embossing powder, which picks up whatever color's behind it and gives it a metallic look. You can see those fun green metallic leaves that we end up with, mixed in with all the colorful green leaves from our other layers. Now, if I had done this with regular Distres ink, the background might have looked a little bit muddy because dye inks absorb into the paper and they're translucent. Oxide inks are more opaque, so you can layer colors and get beautiful looks. Now this technique would work great with background stamps or even individual stamps. So if you don't have a Turnabout stamp set like I just used, I wanted to show you how you could do this with individual stamps. Any stamps you have, mostly ones with some solidness to them. With outline stamps, you don't see the technique as much, so something like these leaves that are a little more solid are good. This is the Concord and 9th So Happy For You stamp set. Lots of great sentiments in this one, but I'll just be using some of the flowers and leaves. I have a piece of white cardstock. This time I'm doing 5.5 by 5.5. I'm not sure why I didn't do 6 by 6, but it doesn't matter. And I've arranged a few of the flowers and leaves randomly on the background. I use my anti-static powder tool, and I'm stamping these with clear VersaMark ink, and I'll clear heat emboss, just like we did on that first layer on our last example. Each time, again, I'll be using clear embossing powder. So here I'll heat set this, let that cool a little bit, and then we can apply our first layer of color. This time I'm using Distres Oxide Tumbled Glass ink. This is a great soft blue ink. After I apply it heavily, I'll go ahead and buff off the excess, and you can see our first layer of flowers pop through, thanks to that clear embossing powder that resists the blue ink we put on top. So I'll put this back in my MISTI, use that anti-static powder bag, position the images in a different spot, stamp those with VersaMark ink, and clear heat emboss again. So I'm just using the individual images to create a background, moving them each time to a new spot. So now we can apply another color on top. This time I use my favorite color, Distres Oxide, Peacock Feathers ink. I can't get enough of that color. We'll buff that and you'll be able to see our original white flowers, then the flowers that we clear heat embossed on top of the tumbled glass blue. So that color is trapped. So it looks like we have all these different colors just layering up together. So I'm going to continue to do this with more layers, each time clear heat embossing images in a different spot, and then adding another layer. So you could do as many layers as you want. If you're using a heavyweight cardstock, it can take all this ink, no problem. And we're not adding any water, so we're not doing anything to harm, like kind of weaken the paper. So you could keep going with as many layers as you want. And say here, I put that blue ink on top, the blueprint sketch, and it looked a little too purpley to me. All I have to do is add another layer on top and buff off the extra. So you can really go to town creating whatever look you want, and that background's not going to get muddy looking. It's going to be a nice crisp color. Now, after adding my last layer of Oxide ink to the background, I noticed that my original white flowers weren't very crisp. I did a lousy job heat embossing that first layer, so some of the blue ink was kind of seeping through. Now, I wanted to fix this. I wanted to make those flowers a little more bright white. So I'm taking the stamps and lining them up with those images so that I can reheat emboss those by stamping on top and embossing again. So you'll see I'm lining up each of those images into my MISTI so that I can do this over. So here's the thing. I am all for imperfection in cards. You know, we're handmade, not Hallmark. It doesn't matter. But if there are little things that you can do to make yourself feel a little happier with your results, then I'm all for it. And in this case, this took me a couple minutes and was worth it for me in the end. So I stamp with VersaMark ink right on top of that embossing. And this time I'm going to add white embossing powder. So now I'll be sure that it's bright white. I could have done this as a last step instead of a first step, but you know, I learned a lesson and now you can see they're very bright white. So sometimes doing a little fix is definitely worth it. Other times just walking away is worth it too. So there you can see the final result, all made with individual images. I did go back with this little splotch image. It's like little dots. It's from the Leaves Turnabout stamp set that I showed you earlier. And I stamped those in some of the open spaces with VersaMark ink and added that pearl embossing powder that I used earlier so that I would have some metallic looking splotches in the background. So now that my backgrounds are done, I can trim them up and I end up with a piece that's big enough for a background on a card and a strip that I can use on another. So I think it's definitely worth it to start with a bigger piece so you can make multiple cards. Now also, I did spray this with a fixative. You do not have to do that. You definitely do not have to do that. But I spent so much time making this background, I want to make sure that it's protected. I don't want to get water on it and activate those Distres Oxide inks. So I decided just to take it outside, do a quick spray with a fixative, and then I don't have to worry. Okay, so I have some tips to share with you as we turn these backgrounds into cards. For the first card, I'm using this Concord and 9th Just Because die set. It's an older one that I reach for often because there are many dies and bits and pieces in here that can be used in different ways. So I've picked out a few that I'll use on this card, but I wanted to show you there's even a little banner die in here that cuts the perfect sentiment strip. This is it here. Now, I don't use it on today's card, but I wanted to mention that because it's a great die in the set. I'm using the frame die cut. It's this really thin white frame and putting strong liquid adhesive on the back and putting that onto vellum. So I'm creating a frame with vellum on the inside. This is an excellent way to create a focal point on a card to put your sentiment on top. It kind of blurs out a little bit of the background but doesn't cover it completely. So it's perfect as a backdrop for sentiments. I got this idea from a card on the Concord and 9th website. They have great examples. I also die cut a leaf from green cardstock, covered it with VersaMark ink, and added clear sparkle embossing powder so that it had some fun sparkle to it when I add it to my card. I also die cut the word because, and I stacked 3 of the die cuts together so it had dimension. Here I'm using liquid adhesive to put my background onto a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch white note card. I like to use liquid adhesive for this so I can place it and kind of move it until it's perfectly centered, and then just hold it down for a bit. Now to add the individual just letters, I wanted to make sure they were positioned right, so I took this negative space, the negative space of the just word, and just taped it down temporarily. Then I took my just die cut letters and popped them right in place with adhesive. Once it was dry, I could remove the negative space as I'm doing here, and my letters are perfectly spaced and lined up. I did die cut 3 of each of these die cuts and stack them together with liquid adhesive so they stand out more against the background, but you don't have to do that. Now, since I've arranged everything onto my frame, I put glue around the edges of the frame and added it to our note card. So on the completed card, you can see how the vellum kind of mutes the center a bit so your sentiment stands out more. And you can also see the fun green layering we have in the background. You've got the little bit of shine from the different embossing powders, and it all pulls together nicely. My next example features a background that's very similar to the one that I just showed you. However, on this one, I did it off screen. I did use some bundled Sage Distress Oxide ink in my layering. Now the frame is from the Concord and 9th Lovely Blossoms die set. I've used this one before also, and it's a favorite of mine. I die cut 3 of the white frames, and I'll glue those on top of each other on some vellum. Now, since this is such a big, thin frame, I didn't want to glue it down out of shape. So I used the centerpiece, which I'll save for another card. By laying it on the vellum, I can put the frame around it, glue that onto the vellum, and then remove the center. That ensures that I glued the frame down perfectly and not kind of wonky on the vellum. So then I glued 2 more on top of there for a nice stacked frame look. Okay, for the center of the frame, I'm using the Concord and 9th Thankful Leaves dies. In this set, there is the leaf outline. Then there's a die that cuts the little pieces in the center, so you can use them together or separate. So I'm layering 2 together here. One is solid and one has the little pieces cut from the center. And then I'm putting adhesive into each of the openings. Now here I have the little pieces cut from a darker green cardstock, and I'll lay it on top, lining it up with those holes on the top that I already removed the little pieces from. And then I'm going to press each of those little pieces into the die cut piece below. So all those pieces will fit in like a puzzle. Now some of them may not go all the way through, but most of them did. So I can lay it back on top and press any down that didn't go through to the layer below. Now you could pop each of these pieces in individually for this inlay look, but by doing that trick where you lay it on top and push them in, you save a lot of time. And there you end up with the leaf with a perfect inlay look. I added this to the center of my vellum frame with some foam tape. Next I'm using the Concord and 9th All About You die set. This is another useful one. It has a die that cuts a large bold U. Then it has words celebrate, for, and thank. I die cut 3 of the U and added them together with the liquid adhesive so it's a nice thick look. And I did the same with the word thank, and I'll glue that right on top. Again, I layer my die cuts. I stack them together just to make them stand out more, but you could just do 1 layer if you want. And then I added that to the center of my card. Now this is a 5 1/2 by 5 1/2 inch card, so I have a 6 by 6 envelope that I use for it, and I'll link to those below also. Sometimes I think it's fun to do a different size. It also gives you more room on the inside to write your personal message or add some stamping if you want to. Next I have the blue card. Now I'm not going to show you the process for this because it's just like the other examples. But I used that frame die cut and added vellum to the center. Then I used the UR sentiment and added that to the center. I also die cut a little blue heart and put some of that clear sparkle embossing powder on it. And I glued everything onto the background, and this is a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch card. I did decide to add some glossy accents to that heart just so it has both sparkle and shine, and when that dries we'll end up with a nice little embellishment there in the center. Now before we go, I have a bonus card for you. Now it doesn't use that layered Distress Oxide Resist technique. However, it uses these leaf die, the leaf die there in the center, in a creative way, and so I thought I'd share it with you. So I'm using that Concord and 9th Thankful leaf die. Again, I have the outline die and then the die that does little pieces in the center. I die cut the leaf, and I'm taking the center die and taping it right into the center of my die cut. Next, I'm going to use my die cut machine as if I were doing an embossing folder. So for the big shot, that's tab 1. Put down a cutting plate, then I put down the Spellbinders Embossing Mat. This allows you to make an impression with the die instead of cutting with it. I'll run this through, and I'll end up with the center pieces of the leaves pressed into my die cut for a really cool textured look. Works great with these dies. Next, I want to add my sentiment to the center of this. So I'm putting the negative space into my MISTI so that I can hold this die cut still. So I put it right into the center. I'll take a sentiment from the Thankful Leaves Turnabout stamp set, place it right in the center, stamp that with VersaMark ink, and use white embossing powder. Now you are stamping onto a textured surface here, so it doesn't get into the little cracks or the little impression areas. So what I'm going to do is really press firmly here. And if you need to, you could do 2 layers of white embossing. But I added my first layer of white embossing here, heat set it, and decided it was good enough. There are some little lines where it didn't emboss. That's okay. I'm going to go in with my white gel pen and fill in those areas so that I have a nice bright white sentiment on that textured leaf. For the background on this one, I used the Turnabout Thankful Leaves stamp set that I showed you at the beginning of this video. But I just did regular stamping with my Distres Oxide inks on white cardstock. So you can see the different look you get. It's completely different than the layered resist technique that I showed you earlier. I added a few gems to the background and put it onto a green note card. Didn't take long to put together, but I wanted to show you that bonus technique. All right, so there you have a way to do Distress Oxide Resist with lots of layering. It's really a fun way, and it creates a beautiful kind of muted background. If you're interested in the supplies, I always have them listed in my YouTube description below. On my blog, I have a whole lot more information, including photos. And in the middle are some videos about Distress Oxide ink if you're looking to learn some more techniques. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon, and have a great weekend.